we are talking in the month of May. Operation Sindoor has completed 1 year. For me, for my generation that has not seen Kargil, Operation Sindoor was really the first major India-Pakistan conflict. As a former army chief yourself, what is your assessment of India's performance in Operation Sindoor, General?
Well, I think before Op Sindoor, we had the surgical strikes after Uri, and we had the Balakot strikes after the terrorist attack in Pulwama. Why I mention these is to put Op Sindoor into context so it can be better understood. After the earlier two terrorist strikes, we had limited our response to terrorist infrastructure or small camps astride the border and only within POK. This time, after this very horrific attack which happened in Pahalgam, we broadened the canvas and we said we will not distinguish between the terrorist, the supporters of terrorists. We will not distinguish between state and non-state actors. So this was a very big inflection point and the change in our entire philosophy. And it is a very important change which has driven home a lesson that you're not going to be safe anywhere, and which is what the Raksha Mantri implied when he said, "Ki ghus ghus kar marenge." That if you do something like this to us, don't you cannot take this fig leaf of deniability or plausible deniability that I don't have control over them. That these are just misguided people who have gone and done something in your country. Why are you blaming us? We are ourselves victims of terrorism. No, and those kind of. So we have very clearly said that something happens, all of y'all will be equally to blame. So that is the major change which happened, and I'm very happy to say that the Army, Navy, Air Force all combined executed this retaliation of ours in a very precise manner. And this retaliation was not only precise, it was punitive, but more than that, it was proportionate. That is the key point, that we did not widen the ambit to the extent that you see, which is happening in other wars which are going on, be it in Ukraine or Hamas in Gaza or in Iran. We restricted it to those terrorist headquarters, and once the Pakistan military retaliated, to those military targets only. So, because of this, our standing in the world has gone up, that we are a responsible power. People understand our pain, they understand the need that was there for us to retaliate and not just take this as just another run of the mill terror attack, and they appreciate the fact that we hit, and when Pakistan approached us for a ceasefire, we accepted that ceasefire on our terms when we were in the ascendant.
Absolutely, and I think I couldn't agree more with your analysis, and the valor of the armed forces that was on display during Op Sindoor was, I think, marvelous to see. But at the same time, you mentioned about Pahalgam and Pulwama. Pulwama, 14th Feb 2019, Pahalgam, 22nd April 2025. So, would you agree that these two attacks were a result of a major intelligence lapse on the part of our security establishment?
No, whenever something happens, we are quick to jump to the conclusion that it is an intelligence failure. Well, yes, when an attack happens, it happens as a result of so many factors which are there. But we have to remember that for every attack which happens, there are probably 100 which have been foiled, which nobody comes to know. That time, no, we don't blow our trumpet that we have spoiled this attack, we have spoiled that attack, because that would give the game away. So we just foil the attack and keep quiet. But one, just like one catch will be dropped in a game, same way one attack will slip through. So you can't suddenly jump to that conclusion of intelligence failure. Yes, there will be always cracks. There will be some gaps in the information. There will be some gaps in the response. So these things are bound to happen from time to time. But we should not straight away start blaming anyone or finding fault. Everyone is doing a difficult job under very difficult circumstances, round the clock. Remember, security forces have to be on guard 24/7, all 365 days of the year. The terrorist has to just get in once for that 10 minutes, 365 days into 60 minutes. Just imagine how alert we have to be all the time. The terrorist just has to find one 5 minute slot. So, it's unfair to make these kind of comparisons or statements that it is a failure. Everybody is doing their best.
So you're saying it's not a failure. Calling that would be an extreme. It was like a slip up. That would that
Yeah,
be an
some
appropriate way to put it?
these things will happen, and it's not that a terrorist attack will not happen in the future either. Everyone will keep learning from every incident that takes place. Certain debriefs would have been carried out, certain lessons would have been learned, loopholes would have been plugged. But as I said, it's a cat and mouse game. You plug 10 loopholes, the enemy will think of a 13th way of doing things. So
Right. Uh,
it is always a continuous
right.
process.
I take your point, sir. I want to draw your attention to a statement you made last week. It was in Mumbai. You batted for India-Pakistan dialogue. For our audience, I'll just read out a quick quote. You said, "Ordinary citizens generally do not have much to do with politics. When friendships develop between the people of two countries, it naturally helps improve relations between the countries themselves." And then you go on why people-to-people contact is more important. In context of the statement you made, do you believe that, given the nature of Pakistan, do you believe that talking it out or dialogue really would be the way to go if we have to solve this problem?
Well, Kautilya had said, that various means to deal with an adversary. Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed. So Sam is talks, negotiations. Dam is, impose costs or bribe. Dand is what we did, the punitive strikes. Bhed is, you sow divisiveness, information war in modern parlance. So all four are, arrows in your quiver. All four are strategies. None of them is standalone. None of them is sequential. It is not that you have two of them cannot operate together. But ultimately, if the guns have to fall silent, you have to talk. Aren't Iran and US talking even while they're fighting with each other? So, a settlement for the guns to fall silent, you have to talk. So, who will you talk with? You will talk to the powers that be who rule that country. The powers that be who rule their country will look after the interests of their people. So, how do you know what is making their people tick? So, there is no harm in talking. We are not talking from a position of weakness, we are talking from a position of strength. But as I said, at some point of time, I'm not saying today, I'm not saying tomorrow, at some point of time, you have to start talking to reach a settlement. So, and if I'm not saying in isolation, there were even before I made this statement about 2 weeks back or a week ago, newspaper articles are happened that track two dialogues are happening. That retired bureaucrats and senior military officials have met of the two countries. Even the places were mentioned that these people have met. So track two dialogue is on. So there is nothing wrong in having this. It is like a fallback option. It is a another route. And as I said, these are all stratagems that have to be adopted. Sam, Dam, Dan, Bhed, all of them in one form or the other, together or individually.
Right.